Fantastic. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining in on this call. This is, of course, a follow-up to the meeting that we had last week, I believe, and it was an opportunity to come in person and share some feedback. We also, with regard to the Lower Roswell project and some of the design decisions that are incorporated into that project, and really what the purpose of the project is, but it was a platform for you all to share some commentary, some feedback, some concerns. And also after that meeting as well, it wasn't just what was presented in that meeting, but there were several emails that came afterwards. And we wanted to do a follow-up to that session and just provide staff the opportunity to share really the response against each of the different points of feedback so that everyone could hear the different concerns that were brought up. And the fact that, we have taken that information in and that we are looking at those pieces and considering those pieces. And so that's really what this meeting is for. This does not mean that this is done anything. It means this is the readout against the information that we've gotten in, the information that people have shared with us. And certainly the door is still open to provide additional commentary, and I will leave some time at the end of this meeting to ask additional questions. So while, however, what I am asking, we do have everyone on mute for now so that DOT can go through the different concerns that were given to us throughout the public outreach and also through that meeting. Give staff a chance to relay that information. And then afterwards, address any follow-ups or comments or things that you think were missing or things that you think were left out. We want to make sure that we're being responsive and looking at all the things that you're looking at as well. So with that, I'm going to turn my little microphone over to Drew. And actually, before I do that, I do want to say thanks to staff for being here, Drew, Karen, and of course, Commissioner Burrell. This is, we're both very interested in what comes of this project and what we're trying to solution for and making sure that it's the right type of solution to the need. So Drew, you have the microphone.
All right. I will introduce myself and then immediately apologize because you may hear in the background. But first, my name is Drew Ressler. I'm the DOT director. Glad to be here today. I do apologize if you hear anything in the background. I had to run home. My wife has a virtual meeting at 6 o'clock. She's got the kids right now, but they may make a little bit of racket. I will push right through it, but my apologies for any distraction there. Before I jump in, I do want to make sure everyone else from the county has had a chance to introduce themselves. Karen?
Hey, I'm Karen Matthews. I'm the project manager for this Lower Roswell Road project. So thank you.
Commissioner Burrell? Still, you're muted. There you go.
Hi, everyone. Joanne Burrell, District 3, Cobb County Commissioner.
Well, thank you again. I'll extend another thank you, just like the commissioner said, an opportunity to come back and answer and address many of the good questions, good comments that were raised about the Lower Roswell Road project. So just to orient everyone, I will share some maps here in a little bit in some of the concepts just to refresh, but in the 2011 SPLOST program, which is Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, the Lower Roswell Road Safety and Operational Improvement Project was listed as a project to be funded from that program. That project has been analyzed and reanalyzed and gone through a couple different iterations that we'll talk about generally, but overall, the project's intent is safety and operational. And so just jumping into the data, we shared last time some of the gross crash, the overall crash rates, but what we didn't get into in great detail was the how that crash rate compares to statewide averages and others. And so just the portion of Lower Roswell Road between Woodlawn and Davidson that is being looked at for this project has a crash rate that's approximately 4.5 times higher than the statewide average. And that's looking at data between 2015 and 2017. So what that comes out to is about 2,900 crashes per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And that's just how we normalize that data. But what that represents is 4.5 times the statewide average for similar facilities. Also, the intersection delays and traffic congestion in the areas does have a negative impact on traffic operations. And those that drive this on a routine basis are very familiar with that. So with the project and going back to the early iterations of the project, a raised median was included in that project. And what data shows about raised medians is that they present a 15 to 57% reduction in crashes. Looking at the numbers that we had there, we went through in that 14 to 16 period, that 3-year period, looked at all of the crashes that happened during that time frame. And similar to that 15 to 57%, we saw that 52% of the crashes on an area that does have a high crash rate would be correctable by installation of a raised median. Again, I'll share the specific concept for those that have not seen it, but and then I'll also show some of the specific crashes that would be correctable. In terms of traffic delay, so again, we'll show the concept, but we have turn lane improvements, intersection improvements throughout the project limits. And to the question of what's the purpose of the project, it's safety and then operations. The traffic study that was done on this particular project shows between a 30 and 50% reduction in congestion at those key intersections of Woodlawn and Johnson Ferry primarily, but also just some delays looking into the future. We saw, just for example, at Johnson Ferry Road in the build year. So once the project is built out, a 38% reduction in delay during the morning peak hour, and then a 27% reduction is anticipated in delay during the afternoon peak hour.
Drew,
Sure.
Certainly I'm interrupting, but not to interrupt your flow. If you're sharing something, you're not sharing something. Okay.
So I'm just walking through text that would be difficult to read. I'm going to show here in just a moment the overall concept and walk through that.
Thanks.
And then there was a question that was raised about whether traffic data should be gathered to reevaluate the scope of the project. So we looked at the data. The 14, 15, and 16 crash update was the most recent update that began the current concept development. Project, when it is put out, goes through a concept and then a preliminary design and then right-of-way acquisition and finally into construction. So it's a lengthy process and it's all stacked on top of itself. The crash data in that 14 to 16 was the most recent. We have updated that crash data and in looking at just general number of crashes, and the crash rate is consistent throughout. The volume data we anticipate it to have come back by now, but of course we saw a pretty substantial dip during COVID. For those that are driving around, you see that dip is gone, and we're really back to status quo in terms of traffic congestion and traffic numbers. And then there was a couple other specific questions. So at that point, I will jump in and share the overall concept. And Commissioner Richardson, if I could get sharing ability.
You should have it.
I do have it.
Okay.
I'm just slow. All right. So hopefully, is everyone seeing a PDF of the concept? And then when I zoom in, I'll look for head nods that you can see it when it's zoomed in. Okay, very good. So I will walk I'll begin on the Woodlawn side. Let my computer catch up to me and show there were not many questions at our last meeting about this part of the project. Most of the questions were on the other side of Johnson Ferry. Nevertheless, this does include intersection improvements by providing an additional through lane on Lower Roswell Road coming through Woodlawn. Just to orient you, we are now just to the west of Johnson Ferry. The church is to the north of us here. Johnson, to the top of the page. The Johnson Ferry is to the right of the page. So this is Lower Roswell at Woodlawn. This project provides an additional through lane coming from Johnson Ferry to be able to make this traffic signal more efficient, as well as providing some additional turn lanes on the Woodlawn approaches. Moving through, you will notice the bike lanes. I do want to come back and address the bike lanes. That was another area that we had gotten a number of questions on. And then we come into the primary part of the safety project. And here in a moment, I will share some crash diagrams. But what this project provides is raised median. So this yellow that you see in the middle of the page, so between those two left turn lanes on Lower Roswell Road, you'll see that yellow outline. That's curb and gutter. You'll note the left turn into, that's McDonald's there, and then the large median there, and then an opposing left turn into the Kroger, and then the left turn, or the median, continues all the way to its intersection with Davidson. This is the area, the particular area where we are seeing a lot of the crashes. We have, on my count, 14 separate driveways on this very short section of roadway, and those movements are creating crash problems. And additional to the crashes that are observed, I would anticipate a significant number of near misses out here. And when this project began back early in the 2011 program, so likely around the 2011-2012 timeframe, the initial concept actually had a median all the way through. And so in terms of some of the questions that were raised about access to business, that was a question that has been raised for the 10 years that this project has been in development. And what has been done to address business access is these short left turn lanes. Again, the one into the McDonald's, and then the opposing left turn lane into the Kroger. Of course, on the south side, there's a fair amount of interparcel connectivity, so the ability to travel between the various businesses there. On the south, on the north, there's not that same interparcel connectivity, and looking at that connectivity was something that was examined earlier in the projects. But this was settled on because of the balance of being able to provide that access into these establishments, but avoiding those more dangerous movements coming out of those businesses, where someone may attempt to turn left into the center turn lane and then be trying to merge over at the same time someone is turning left into the opposing direction and merge in the opposite direction, and this creating a lot of various movements. And anytime we have a lot of different types of movements in a particular area, that's where we have risks for crashes. When things are very consistent and it's a through lane where everyone is going the same direction and there's not a lot of turning movements, there's far less risk than anytime we introduce a driveway, we introduce additional conflict points throughout the project. To accommodate the other access to the other businesses that are not McDonald's on the north side, we did make sure that the intersection was wide enough to facilitate U-turns at the intersection of Davidson. So any driver that is coming from Johnson Ferry has the ability to make a U-turn at a signalized intersection. Another question that was raised is, could there be an interim traffic signal, a traffic signal somewhere in the middle of this project, potentially where that larger median is, maybe at the Kroger driveway, that could help with those left turn lanes? And what we see with traffic signals, and we addressed this very briefly last time, but what we see with traffic signal is actually, because you've introduced a new stop point, you've introduced new congestion, delays increase, as well as the number of crashes would be anticipated to increase because we're not able to provide that minimum spacing and the volumes that would be necessary to justify that traffic signal on the side streets are not there. Again, the interparcel connectivity does address much of that. I will stop sharing and then attempt to reshare so that I can show some of those crash diagrams so that we can see a little bit more specifically some of the crashes that are occurring on this section.
And Drew, just to let you know, there are two questions that came in regarding the actual design.
Sure.
Not alterations, but just some clarification.
Okay.
And you're welcome to take them now or take them at the end.
If I could take them in just 1 second, so because I'll kick back over to the concept. But just zooming in right here, this demonstrates some of the crashes that are happening, and it's not unexpected. Where you'll note coming from this driveway here, where you see a couple of the crashes. One looks to be with potentially a pedestrian that they're likely looking back to see if they have a gap and have hit someone in the sidewalk. You see a rear end crash there, a crash where someone is turning out, side swipes. The diagram really does speak for itself, but this demonstrates some of the crashes that we are having in the area. And then again, you'll note where you have a higher volume driveway, you would expect more crashes. Much of the same is happening here, where left out of that driveway are interacting with the faster moving traffic on Lower Roswell, creating some of those crash challenges. And I do want to kick back over to the concept and speak about the bike lanes just briefly, and then make sure I answer the clarifying questions that have come in. So the other elements, we've spoken about the safety, we've spoken about the operations. I do want to take a moment to speak about the bike lanes. So there have been previous investments into Lower Roswell Road, and there are bike lanes from Davidson to the east, and they end here at Davidson. The purpose of the bike lanes is to serve the existing bicycle traffic, and to allow them to have a separated space that where the cyclists are not having to mix with faster moving traffic. And so it's really to serve the cyclists that are already there. Additionally, the inclusion of those bike lanes does match with the various plans that the county has done through the years for bicycle and trail connectivity throughout the county. And really provides a more logical termini or endpoint for the bicycle lanes to, rather than end at Davidson, allow those bicycles to come through some of the more challenging driveways and intersections in a dedicated space through Johnson Ferry to be able to get out to Woodlawn, where traffic does become a little bit more residential, fewer of the commercial driveways and turning movements happening throughout that section. So with that, I do want to pause. Commissioner Richardson, can you help me with what those questions were?
I sure can. All right, so the first one, is there a reason there is no crosswalk at the eastern edge of Woodlawn and Lower Roswell? So it's that other intersection.
Karen, can you help me with that one?
Yeah, so that came up. I was newer to this project when we had this public meeting, and this display was put together for that meeting a year ago. And so that question came in from a few different folks. And I went back to the project design team, and it seems that it was just, the answer was basically that was what was out there then, and they had not analyzed that fully. And so we went back and we analyzed it more completely, and I can tell, I'm looking at my engineering drawings right now, and there are 4 crosswalks at that intersection now. We have added that in because it is a needed crosswalk.
Excellent. Next question, U-turns could also be made at the left turn lanes in the median, correct?
They could be. It is an allowable movement. I would probably recommend someone go to the signalized intersection, particularly with Davidson, to make that U-turn. But it is possible for those U-turns to happen in those spaces. That is a legal movement.
Okay. Residents on Arvilla Way would need to cross 3 streets to go to Ming's restaurant during a 1/10 of a mile walk.
That's referring to us not having that 4th crosswalk.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense then. Given the congestion in this area, would it not be smart to simply prohibit bicycling?
And I see some of those comments coming in, but it is not. Excuse me. Cyclists have the right to use all of the roadways. They're prohibited from interstates, but they have every right as any vehicle to utilize any roadway that is a county roadway. And so by providing a dedicated bike lane, we provide the space for the existing cyclists rather than prohibiting the movement. It provides a safe area for a mode that is currently allowed to be used and cannot be disallowed.
Yeah, I was gonna ditto you on that one. We can't really prohibit.
I do want to before we jump entirely into questions, I do want to address one other item. I hesitate to talk about open, and we will not talk about open right away. So in terms of the process, we're going through right away acquisition at this point to facilitate the project. The concept has been approved. A lot of questions were raised recently, so that's the purpose of these meetings. Nevertheless, we've been purchasing right away to prepare for this to go to construction. One of the properties that came up at the last meeting that has since been settled, where the owner has agreed, and without getting into the particulars, but was Tijuana Joe's. And I know that's a staple of this part of East Cobb, and it's right here on the intersection of Johns Ferry, Lower Roswell Road. It has fantastic visibility. You can see it coming really all directions, and the iconic sign that they have there. I've not eaten there, but I've heard really good things. So I know this is a business that the community feels very strongly about. We've been working very closely with this property owner and all of the property owners throughout the project limits. Again, they have settled on the acquisition that we need to facilitate the project, have answered their questions about access. They do have driveways on both Lower Roswell and Johnson Ferry, which gives them the ability to access directly from three different directions. The more challenging direction to access from, because coming from the north, someone could turn left onto Lower Roswell and then right in. From Marietta, they can come across Johnson Ferry and turn right in. Down from Fulton County, the Chattahoochee River coming north, they could turn right in. So access in pretty easily from those three directions. What is not as direct is coming from the east, from the right side of the page. And so that was one of the questions that they asked us after the meeting. We are trying to get them in contact with the owners of the larger parcel back here that owns everything that the Kroger site, in order to help with interparcel access, so that there's an ability, and we at DOT love the idea of interparcel access, where you provide this ability to cross across different businesses throughout a larger development area. And so we're making that connection to try to help that interparcel access, which would improve their situation. Even currently, it's a driveway that is very difficult to get into even now from some of those directions, turning left in particular. The other question that they had is, again, that very iconic sign that they have for Tijuana Joe's. We have already had conversations with community development. They're limited today on space. They will be limited in the build condition on space, and trying to work through some different alternatives with community development on how we can help them be able to retain the visibility that they have today. Again, the goal of any project is, obviously we want to take care of the safety and operations, because there's more than 20,000 cars a day that drive Lower Roswell, more than that on Johnson Ferry. So that's very important. But those that feel this project the most, more than the travelers daily, is the folks that live and work and operate businesses in a project. So we work very hard with our property owners to be able to settle out and identify anything that we can possibly do, either directly through the project or indirectly through conversations that we can help facilitate, just like I mentioned here, and use this as an example of making connections between a business and an adjacent business for interparcel access, or between a business and an adjacent or sister county department to help with approvals on a sign. And I have worked through my notes, and so Karen, I do, before we jump into any remaining questions or additional questions, was there anything that I've missed?
No, I think you you hit most of the areas. I did see another clarification question come in about the multi-use path being extended, and the answer is yes, that is being extended throughout the project. Continuation of that multi-use path coming from the roundabout down at Willio and continuing all the way to Woodlawn. So the answer to that. And we already addressed the crosswalk. So yeah, I think that that touches on all of the questions that we had from the meeting. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. I see more questions coming in.
Yeah, Karen, that was an answer on the roundabout at the Woodlawn side. Sorry, I'm trying to go back.
My understanding is that early on, one of the concepts that was explored was roundabouts for some of the intersections on this project. With Lower Roswell Road being a 4-lane road, those would be pretty massive roundabouts and multi-lane roundabouts, and those they can work, but more challenging to learn with the multi-lane. So that ended up not being the preferred alternative for this project.
Yeah, I think there were 2 questions about roundabouts, one for Lower Roswell Road and Kroger, and then the other one on the other side by Woodlawn.
Yeah, yeah, and for all of those, you know, it would be a pretty massive roundabout because of the 4 lanes of Lower Roswell Road.
Another question, excellent to see the bike lanes. Are there plans to further extend them?
So we don't have any programmed projects at this time for additional bike lanes, but as any capital projects come through, we always look at all modes of traffic, pedestrian, cyclists, buses, all of the different modes for any given roadway. Drew, did you have anything else on extension of bike lanes? Yeah. So nothing programmed at this time in this area.
And then we have a question around pedestrian scramble, and that's on the Woodlawn, Lower Roswell side.
We do. So we have our first project that we did install a pedestrian scramble was over at the Braves game, Braves area. And that is generally what it's used for. It's when we have massive amounts of pedestrians crossing a roadway and we want to go ahead and let them take over the entire intersection during, you know, all signals go red, pedestrians can cross in every direction, but it is not something that we generally consider for something with a lower pedestrian volume like this area.
Is there also a shared use path being continued through this area from east of Davidson?
Yes, it's on the south side of the road.
Okay, Larry, perhaps we can have a follow-up on the point you're bringing up here. He makes a comment that cyclists claim that state law gives them the right to use the roads, and you've looked into this. So perhaps if you have anything that you can share or send over to the office, you're welcome to share that information so you can see what you're referring to on that front. We have a why didn't you do cross easements on the north side between McDonald's and other businesses for interparcel access?
So we did actually explore that. There were some concepts done early on to consider something along the lines of almost a frontage road to connect all those businesses, or something in the back, potentially even something connecting all the way to the Old Town Athletic Club area. Various property owners for those businesses sat down at a few different stakeholder meetings, and at the end of the day, that just was not their preferred method, that was not something that they were in favor of, was the potential loss of parking or just other reasons in terms of insurance and liability with cross easements, that that was just something that the business owners were not in favor of.
And then we have another one from Larry. Is there an estimate of the number of bikes that might travel through here? This is, I know Commissioner Burl and we chatted about this too. Drew, I know you have a.
So there's not a methodology that I'm aware of to be able to project cyclist use, but it does provide for the accommodation of the cyclists that are there currently.
I know we're looking at, definitely considering the bike path plan, especially the one that you all have brought up, making sure that that is incorporated as a part of the analysis for projects, just soup to nuts, honestly. So Beth had a follow-up, and that's on the south side of Lower Roswell, correct? The shared use path?
Correct, south side.
That's correct.
Okay. Larry, will the bike lanes and MUP end at Johnson Ferry Road?
No, they continue to Woodlawn.
What's that?
They both continue to Woodlawn.
Then we have Chris, reference on the previous question. Could a pedestrian scramble, four-way stop for cars, four-way go for walkers be implemented at Lower Roswell?
So I guess, Drew, you're the traffic engineer. Do you have any additional thoughts on the pedestrian scramble?
Yeah, Karen, I think you covered it very well. So I've seen them be successful in areas, just like you said, where there's just massive pedestrian volume. And in another area that I had implemented one in a past life was with Athens, Clarke County, down near the stadium there in downtown Athens, right on campus, where there's a big student learning center and a dining hall on opposite sides of the road. And anytime you have a situation like that, major generators, you would have driving through there, you could have on any given cycle hundreds of pedestrians cross a road just within a span of 2 or 3 minutes. And the risk with volumes like that is that the volumes expand out and they begin to queue back and people start waiting in the road, and then they kind of bleed out into the road, and it creates a concerning situation there. So the purpose of the scramble is to provide more capacity for the signal to be able to accommodate all of those pedestrians, so you don't have these large queues. Unless you get to a point where you have massive queues of dozens of pedestrians on each corner consistently throughout the day, having a pedestrian cycle unnecessarily delays vehicle traffic, and we will always prioritize safety over operations. But nevertheless, when we implement a scramble for 1 or 2 pedestrians in a crossing at a time, rather than 100 or 200 pedestrians at a time, the delay is much higher in that scenario for the vehicular traffic. And then in that balance, we believe that we can safely accommodate the 1 or 2 pedestrians in the existing crosswalks, as is typically expected in an intersection like that, compared to closing an intersection for a period of time. The other thing to remember about pedestrian timing is we have to accommodate signals for the slowest of walkers that could be expected there. And so the amount of time that a signal is allowed for a pedestrian crossing is based on the distance, and then a feet per second that is a very conservative feet per second. So the lower that number is, the longer that pedestrian cycle is. So those are the general reasons why keeping them individual crossing.
Susan, I see you have a comment question about the project being under consideration by the county and opposed by the residents. The truth is that it's kind of a mixed bag. There are people who are really looking forward to it, people that are absolutely against any spending project, people that are against it for specific reasons, people that are for it for specific reasons. And so we're doing our absolute best to take in everyone's opinions and considerations. And of course, we're prioritizing the safety aspect, but beyond that, all the other, design elements, opinion elements, what works, the different parts of the community within this community that we're serving. That's what we're trying to get out of this particular meeting, get out of the other meetings, public hearings, your emails, and just make sure that we're reflecting the general opinion. So there is no project being forced. It's a conversation, and there's an issue, and we're trying to resolve it. And we're trying to take into consideration everything else that goes along with that as well.
I see a question about potential changes in speed limits. Will that be considered? Karen, can you confirm? I believe Lower Roswell is 35 miles an hour through here. Is that correct, or is it? We can
sure.
and confirm. Oh, is it? I'm seeing 4 held up. So is it 40 miles an hour through here? Nevertheless, we'll confirm that and take a look. The state law is fairly restrictive in terms of setting of speed limits and how that is done, and it requires sign off at the state level from both. There we go. From both the State Department of Transportation and the State Department of Public Safety there. What we would be glad to do is take a look at the project after completed. What we find with medians is not only do they enhance the safety of a roadway segment, they also tend to lower speeds and have a traffic calming effect as well. And so we'd be glad to revisit the corridor after a construction project to determine if the criteria is sufficient to be able to justify a lower speed limit, at which point it would have to go through that process of Georgia Department of Transportation, Georgia Department of Public Safety, after a traffic engineering review, setting an appropriate speed limit.
And for Marcia, I see the question that came in, is it possible to do a frontage road for the properties on Lower Roswell? Since there's a right-of-way, I think it was referenced earlier as a part of another separate question, but there was a design that did include that. That was ultimately not preferred by the businesses in the area. But Drew, Karen, you're welcome to add on if I'm incorrectly stating that.
I think ideally everyone would agree having interparcel connectivity is the best for both the businesses, for the traffic operations. There were some practical constraints that Karen addressed in terms of loss of parking and costs associated and general business support of it that did not the feasible recommended alternative that we've shown today. I see the confirmation on the 40 miles an hour. Thank you. I was trying to quickly pull up our GIS and confirm that, but my fingers are not that quick.
And you see can they add another left turn lane into Lower Roswell Road?
I'm not sure which address that is, but we'd be glad to take a look at that one and see and we'd be glad to follow back up. So the next question I see, why don't you consider lowering the speed limit before you spend this kind of money to construct a median that most residents do not want? The primary cause of the crashes, looking back through the individual reports over the 2-3 year periods, was the turning movements, turning left primarily out of these driveways, a lot of congested driveways through the area, a lot of different turning movements, split focus of those drivers. And so we're seeing that the primary cause there is rather than speed, we're seeing it as a function of the turning movements. And that's the traffic engineering recommended solution for those excessive turn movements that have become unsafe is to install a median. And so that's the purpose of the median. Lowering of the speed limit is likely not recommended based on current conditions because those speed limits were established based on traffic engineering practices. it's typically after a change that a speed limit would be looked at for a potential modification.
And Commissioner Burrow, I know you were on mute, so apologies on that, but certainly want to give you some space. I don't know if there's.
That's fine. I just was going to ask Karen or Drew for some clarification. It's my understanding that coming from the east, the sidewalk, well, the bike lanes end at Davidson. And then there's also existing bike lanes from Johnson Ferry to Woodlawn now? Or is that part of this project to add them?
The current bike lanes, and Karen, keep me honest, the current bike lanes come up to Davidson. So they extend from Davidson to the east. There are not currently bike lanes any further than Davidson. This project extends those bike lanes from Davidson through the intersection of Johnson Ferry Road to Woodlawn, which is the end of the project on the other side of Johnson Ferry.
Right, okay. But there are currently sidewalks now. Just
That's
not
correct.
like bike lanes all the way through.
That's
Thank
correct.
you.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts?
I see the clarification that 4811 is left of McDonald's. I assume that's closer to Johnson Ferry. So we did look at those access points and trying to add as many of the left turns as possible to help from Lower Roswell into the businesses, because we're seeing most of the crashes as the lefts out. But unfortunately, adding additional lefts, especially closer to Johnson Ferry, would then result in limiting the ability to have those two left turn lanes from Lower Roswell to turn south onto Johnson Ferry to go down towards the river. And so in the balance, again, of accessibility to individual businesses and mobility of the 20,000+ on the project, it made more sense in the concept to have that space available to help with the left turn. That's a congested left turn from Lower Roswell onto Johnson Ferry, in order to avoid that traffic from backing out into the through lanes, which would cause an additional point of potential rear end crashes.
And you can address this last one, Drew, and then I'm going to close this out, do the thank yous and then the takeaways for everybody, because there are some gifts, I guess, that will come after this call. But Drew.
So in terms of moving the left turn lane, that gets into just what we talked about in shifting that left turn lane closer to Johnson Ferry. We take away space from the lefts, the dual lefts that are going from Lower Roswell to Johnson Ferry. So it would create a situation where traffic would back out into Lower Roswell Road, creating again risk for rear end crashes.
Okay. And Virginia, I know we'll maybe, Drew, if there's a short answer.
Short answer is we do the best we can to minimize impacts during construction in disallowing work during morning and afternoon peak hours. We would continue that through this project. Okay,
fantastic. All right, everyone. I want to say thank you so much for attending our follow-up meeting and listening to staff. Hopefully you saw we really tried to catalog everything that came in and provide some type of response regarding each of those concerns and ideas. I want to say a big thank you to staff for all the work that you do and continue to do. We appreciate you. Commissioner Burrell, thank you for your very deep interest in this project and making sure that it is successful as well. Whatever that winds up being, whether it isn't, but that we are focused on the right things. And definitely to the community for being here, for caring about your community, for being willing to talk about what makes sense for our community. With that, as a follow-up to this, you'll get a copy of this recording, and I'll also be making a prettier version of what was shared in today's session in case we have individuals who don't want to sit for the 45 minutes of the session, that you'll be able to share as well. So be on the lookout for that sometime at the latest Monday, but maybe as early as tomorrow. But you'll get an email with that information. And like I said, feel free to share it. I know you already feel free to share it, but just encouraging you to do so as well, and make sure everyone else feels as though if they have any ideas or comments or concerns, that also finds its way into our wheelhouse. So with that, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Thursday. I hope it's going well, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend too. Bye.